Hey, this is Mark Pugh again with Straight Out of Workers' Comp live from the WCI conference in sunny, hot, humid. Oh my God, why do we have a conference in Orlando, Florida in mid-August? But happy to be joined here by Gloria Fagan from Shepherd Center.
Yes.
And she and I have had lots of drive-by discussions in hallways and stuff. And I figured the best way to actually have a substantive kind of sit-down discussion is to invite her to the podcast. So
I'm glad to
appreciate
be
you joining us.
Thank you so much, Mark.
So you got a unique perspective on kind of what happens with a really badly injured employee,
Yes.
and trying to get them to engage in their own recovery, to help their significant others, their family, all that kind of stuff. What is that like on a day-to-day basis to help kind of empower them to kind of move forward?
So one of the main things that we do is try to focus on seeing beyond just that injury, because these patients that are coming into us, they've had something dramatically, change their course of their life.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to readapt to the new normal. So we bring in our full interdisciplinary team. That's a holistic approach. So having our physicians, our case managers, our neuropsych department. We have peer support groups, so people who have gone through, whether it's spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury, having them all get involved into that care and help that patient figure out, hey, this is a new normal, but how do we figure out what are we going to do next? Like, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So you mentioned a lot of disciplines, which means there's a lot of layers to a person's response to an injury.
Yes.
And obviously, hopefully, a restoration of function. What is it like to deal with multiple layers? Because you think about, okay, we're going to physically heal you, but that may not necessarily be the end of the story, right?
Correct. So when we think about it, we want to think about it more than just a physical function. You think about it's their identity that has changed. You're an injured worker who was just going to work and going about their day, and now your identity is completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be able to focus and take that holistic approach, and that's why we use so many parts of the disciplinary team
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we're engaged. But in that engagement, we have team conferences, so we're discussing the patient, everyone is having an interaction, and then we include the family early on. I think that's a key piece, is
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they're also involved, because this didn't just happen to that person, this is happening to the family as well. So keeping everyone engaged and on the same page about how are we going to help them improve, and then making sure that you have the injured worker engaged in their goals. Like, what do they want to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Because, just because you can't walk again doesn't mean that's the end of your story. So what are your goals? And we have patients who, I want to get back out and golf. We'll take them out and we'll go golfing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we start
Okay.
with simulation, and if they
In Augusta, do you get to take them to the Masters?
So I'm not gonna. No.
Okay.
I wish. But if that's something they want to do, and let's say they're out of Atlanta, so if we need to get them ready to get onto an airplane,
Mm-hmm.
we will simulate getting onto that airplane so they can fly to Augusta.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And go to the Masters. But
Uh-huh.
we're trying to help them simulate what this new normal and this new life is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I did a barnstorming tour, functional restoration programs back in 2010, 11, 12,
Yeah.
visited a bunch around the country. And I always thought of functional restoration like multidisciplinary.
Mhm.
But then I learned the different term of interdisciplinary,
Yes.
which is a completely different
Yes.
take on it. It's not that you got multiple disciplines. They're all talking, communicating, working as a team. How do you foster that teamwork in order for everybody kind of working towards a common goal?
Absolutely. So it's patient-centered. We keep that patient top of mind. I did an ethics conversation yesterday, and as we're moving forward with AI and being able to put all these things into the computer system,
Mhm.
sometimes things get lost. So what I was talking about earlier, having that team conference,
Mhm.
everyone comes in and they sit. So our physicians come in and sit down, the nurses come in and sit down, the external work comp case managers are coming in, they're sitting down at the table, the therapist, the neuropsychologist is coming. Everyone comes together and we have this full discussion on, okay, what's working for this
Mhm.
patient? What isn't working?
Mhm.
Where are we progressing this week? And what do we need to do to make sure that we're progressing next week? Have they had a setback? Because if they have, then we can readjust that.
Mhm.
So we take hold of the the whole person and make sure that the whole team is staying involved and on top of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it doesn't happen very often, but there's probably some circumstances where they don't make it.
Yeah.
From a fatality standpoint,
Yeah.
if they're going to succumb to their occupational injury, they probably did that before they get to you guys, but it still probably happens.
Yes.
How do you deal with that very difficult circumstance and the fact that, again, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Right.
and now they don't have their husband or their father or their mother or their brother or sister or whatever? How do you deal with that really difficult, challenging circumstance?
So we have a rigorous program to get patients into Shepherd. So we're always looking and making sure that we're answering those questions as to who is going to be that point of contact, because sometimes people, unfortunately, they are alone.
Mhm.
But we do a lot of research before we're letting them enter Shepherd to figure out who is going to be your person that you can lean on for this.
Mhm.
So if something were to happen, at Shepherd or while they're, in Shepherd, that's one of the things that we're preparing for. So, you think about any other hospital setting that they're going into. Do they have the advanced directive? Are they able to, figure out, okay, well, what were their goals? What were they wanting to happen
Mhm.
to them?
Mhm.
And being respectful of that. And that's kind of the same process, even with, their rehabilitation. It's making sure that we're on the same page and doing with what their wishes are, what
Gotcha.
they really want.
Gotcha.
And so I think that's a very good question. A lot of times, like you said, these fatalities may happen before they come to us, but some people, and I think I get a little sensitive because some people do succumb to their injuries after discharge. We don't see a lot internally,
Mhm.
but we see so many impactful stories and success stories. That's what I think I just truly live for.
Mhm.
And that's how Shepherd was started. It was a family
Remind
member.
me again. I forget exactly what
So,
happened now.
the family member, they were out of the country. They were surfing and end up having a spinal cord injury. And they went to our sister hospital, which was Craig Hospital out in Colorado.
Okay. Mhm.
And so there was no Shepherd Center at the time. So this was 50 years ago because we're celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year. And, the Shepherds decided, hey, we need a facility like this in Atlanta. We don't have anything like that in the Southeast. And so they modeled the system after that.
Okay.
And we got donations, and we've since, grown to this 152 bed facility.
Wow.
We have family housing.
It's on Piedmont.
Yes, right
Okay,
off
in
of Piedmont,
downtown
in
or
downtown.
Midtown,
Well,
Brookhaven.
it's
I used
it's
to work down there.
debatable.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say it's debatable, but
Okay.
it's right off of Peachtree,
Okay.
which is a long road. But
Mhm.
it's one of these beautiful facilities now that we're just continuing to expand, to continue to grow. I talked about how important the family is. So
Mhm.
having that donor-funded family housing where the family can stay the entire time that the patient is with us and be able to be engaged in that therapy, have other family support there because we have family support systems. So think about them going through that continuum of care all through with Shepherd.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we've talked a lot about best practices.
Okay.
Tell a story besides the origination story
Okay.
of Shepherd, of someone who came in and it was touch and go, lots of stuff going on. The multidisciplinary approach worked. Everybody was working on the team. They had supportive family. They had the right attitude. You empowered them to kind of engage in their own recovery, and they walked out or they rolled out in a wheelchair, but they had the right attitude. Is there a story that kind of comes to mind that's like encapsulates all the best practices you talked about?
Yes. There's so many stories.
I bet there are. Yeah.
I'm trying to, but one that always sticks out to me, I do want to, this person didn't necessarily go through, but you brought up something important. We have an ICU inside of Shepherd. So patients can come directly from the acute care setting into our ICU setting. So we take patients who are on the ventilator and we can wean them from the vent, and we'll starting therapy as soon as they hit our doors. So they can be in ICU, start therapy, and continue to emerge from there. But the patient that I'm thinking about in particular wanted to be, talking about goals. Having the patients or the injured worker be invested in their care and having goals set of what they want to do, he wanted to be an 18-wheeler truck driver. So imagine
Was he before the injury?
Yes.
Okay.
So imagine having to figure out how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's a spinal cord injury and he's now in a wheelchair. What do we have to do?
Mm-hmm.
But because he was motivated and we were able to figure out, okay, we've got to get this fitted truck to accommodate getting him up into the 18-wheeler truck,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how we're going to use the pedals, teaching him how to do some of these things himself,
Mm-hmm.
and then also raising money and awareness to help him with that. Because unfortunately, work comp can't cover the totality of that, because that was quite the expense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But having someone who is so motivated and driven, and I think what we think is, someone who's had a spinal cord injury, oh, they're never going to do this. Their life before is done.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
Mm-hmm.
There just may be accommodations that we need to make and figure out, how can we partner. We do a lot with their assistive technology group and making modifications, and I think that's so important too.
Mm-hmm.
In moving the dial forward.
They're part of the team.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. So all of that just in its totality, and to get that person back on the road, that was just an amazing story. And he came back, and once he had his truck all done, just to have people be able to come out and kind of check out,
Nice.
check out how well it was working, and
Uh-huh.
see him get up into it. I mean, it was just amazing. I don't know the correct terminology, the rig, that might be right, I don't know. But he was that's just such an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think of another case where there was a guy who was basically trimming trees. So he was very young and getting up, cutting those trees down. And one of the things that I met with him recently, and one of the things he said, having that injury was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
And I said,
that's not what you would expect.
I've never had anyone say that.
Mm-hmm.
But with him being young, and even though it's a spinal cord injury, with him being young, I think his perspective on life changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming into Shepherd and seeing some of our physicians are in wheelchairs.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
We have several physicians that are spinal cord injuries. So seeing that anything can happen, anything's possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to limit yourself because of this injury.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, Shepherd, we're looking beyond the injury. I think is so important.
Mm-hmm. What ended up with him? What did he do after he exited Shepherd?
He was not able to go back to work, but he did get married, have children. They travel a lot. I think he's doing more like community outreach. Now, I think he got really into, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, onto a rugby team.
What?
Yes. So Shepherd, we have a lot of athletic people, and we figure out ways that we can kind of get them re-engaged into something that's exciting for them.
Gotcha.
So that was one of the things, and so we have teams for that, like basketball.
I've seen wheelchair basketball and wheelchair volleyball.
Yeah.
Rugby would not be on the.
It's a lot of things that you kind of figure out and navigate.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully I'm not getting that wrong, but I think that's one of the things.
Well, rugby is pretty easy to spot from a sports standpoint.
Yeah.
So most work comp claims don't require that level of service. Fortunately, there's not that many severe injuries.
Right.
So for someone who maybe hasn't encountered that yet as a claims professional, or only every 18 months or something, what's a checklist of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that they need to be considering as they're trying to figure out, okay, I just got the word this person fell off a 30-foot ladder and they broke their neck and it looks like they're going to be a quadriplegic and they're in the acute care. What should a claims adjuster, claims professional, nurse case manager, what should they be thinking in regards to, okay, we're not focused on that. We're focused on their return to functionality as best we can make it, and making lemonade out of lemons and trying to make that. What's some of the things that should be top of mind that people who don't do this on a daily basis like you should be thinking of?
I think always think about the discharge process on admission. So as soon as that injury happens, you need to go ahead and start thinking about placement and where that person's going to go.
Okay.
So start thinking about, whatever center of excellence, whether that's Shepherd or what other place that you have that's in, that's ranked, and that they're really going to focus on patient outcomes and care, because a lot of our patients, we're above the national average for returning to, life. So returning to life. So focus on those type of goals for that patient, but also make sure that when you're looking at different centers of excellence, that they have support.
Okay.
So, like I was talking about this whole time with the interdisciplinary team, that's important. Make sure that there are some goals that you're setting that are realistic, because we want to get people back to work, but when you have a severe injury like that, think about, what are they offering? Just like I was telling you, we have an ICU program. So that tells you how quickly you can get them out of that acute care setting, because what you want to avoid is further complications. With a focus on some place that has a continuum of care like we do. We're able to do inpatient, outpatient, beyond therapy. So we do the full continuum with that patient. And I think that helps narrow down some of that rehospitalization and complications that you often see when you have big injuries.
Gotcha.
But you brought up another point. I don't think a lot of people realize that we also have concussion. So we have a concussion clinic. So even though we do these big, huge brain injury and spinal cord injuries, there's still a concussion clinic component that we have,
which is much more prevalent.
Yes. And so, you get these bumps on the head at work, and we have that, and it's an outpatient basis type of thing. So you can always, call Shepherd, and we can get them into that program as well.
We're coming out of a generation when I was growing up, rub some dirt on it, toss the smelling salts and go back out on the field, kind of thing.
Yes.
It is interesting. I'm a Falcons fan. Are you a Falcons fan? Or you live in Atlanta,
yeah,
so
you have to be a Falcons fan to live in Atlanta.
Okay, well, that wasn't an overwhelming commitment to the Falcons.
Well, listen, so if you ask my husband, he's all in.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm not so much of a sports person. I support my daughter in her sports, and then I support my college that I attended, and it's not in Georgia. So
Gotcha.
I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. Well, one of the preseason games that just occurred, there was an injury on the field. The Detroit Lions player head jerked back from the running back, and he was surrounded by players, and then ultimately by EMTs. And it was about a 20-minute wait, and then they eventually brought the ambulance on the field, which is not good. They usually cart you off on whatever.
Yes.
And what was so unique, and
I know
think,
what you're talking about.
People were really taken aback by the players didn't want to play, and the coaches understood that.
Right.
And the Falcons had the ball at the time, and they snapped it, and they just all stood there. And I was looking at it, it's like, that's weird. I've never seen that happen before. But it was pretty obvious as they were letting the time go off like a minute. It's like, okay, they're not interested. And eventually the announcers came on, and then the announcers were talking about, this is a sign of the progress in the NFL.
Absolutely.
Of mental health, and the fact that they just saw one of their folks do that. I thought that is going to be an interesting, I think, pivot point when people talk about concussions, which ended up that was happening.
Right. But you never know. Right.
You never know at that point.
Right. So that's another thing, I the psych piece, we forget about that mental component, because there is a loss, right, that's happening with our patients. There's some grief. There's some anger, that's happened, and trying to help them navigate through all those emotions, that's important. And and every place just doesn't offer that service. And I think it's so important. And like you said, as we're moving forward, our generation, we can't, we don't just throw the dirt on it anymore and say, oh yeah, you're fine.
Right.
It's this new generation, and I think that's a great thing that's come about, is that they are focused on their mental health. And some of those things that you're seeing happen, if it were worse than what it was, there's PTSD that they're suffering from.
True.
That I think we kind of had to get over it, but we're not in that area that you just have to get over it anymore. And I thank God for that. I think it's a blessing.
It's a good
to
thing.
Not have to just get over it, but we can power through and have tools to do that.
And baby boomers, like, come on. But that's where we're at as a society and a culture. And I think the younger generation, the Gen Z, the alpha generation that's now coming into the workplace, they're going to have that expectation that they understand the mental is connected to the physical.
Absolutely.
We didn't necessarily deal with that very good. So sorry.
So, hey, but we're resilient, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
So
hey, we lived through a lot. I lived through 9/11.
Right.
You know,
right.
I lived through 2008. I lived through the 1990s. I lived through bell bottoms in the 1980s. I mean, you know, I've suffered a lot of trauma throughout
Listen
my
at
life.
you. Hey, all the little bell bottoms are circling back around.
They are
so,
not for me though.
The people who've done it were like, all right, we're good on it. We don't need to see everything.
I even wore
back.
heels back in the day.
Wow,
I had the stacks.
Yeah.
Oh, they were sweet.
Oh,
they were like
wow.
awesome. Yeah. Can't do that nowadays.
You know,
though.
it's all different. Well, never say that you can't.
Well, that's true.
Maybe
that's
you,
probably true.
maybe you, but
yeah,
there's some that might.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, any last words?
I really just want people to make sure, like I started out, is saying that we focus more on the patient and think about them holistically. It's
Mhm.
not just this injury, and it's not just them. It's the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget their family. You know, don't forget the person. Don't forget the human behind that claim number. Don't forget that this is someone's life. This is someone's identity that has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So just having compassion for that and building up and being supportive, having that support environment is so crucial in that. So,
Got you. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thanks
Gloria.
for having
and I
me.
really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes.
Now we need to do a meal together.
Absolutely. We'll do it. We'll get it
Great.
done.
Straight out of workers' comp, straight from WCI. Y'all take care.